Greetings, everybody. It's your boy Dabby Dan once again, and this is the Black Evolution, Part 6. I'm going to talk about one topic, a very important topic for Black people. It's called building our own community. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. So, when it comes to building our own community, we need to have several things in order for us to be successful. We need to have our own hospitals. We need to have our own schools. We need to have our own banks. And we need to have our own businesses. Let me say it again. These are the top 4 things we need to have in our community: hospitals, schools, banks, and businesses. The only 5th thing we need to add is the police department, because they're killing us right now with all this stuff going on. So that's 5 things: banks, schools, businesses, hospitals, and the police department. So in order to be successful, we need to build our own community. Now, I know what a lot of people say. They're going to think, well, Daniel, don't we have our own community right now? No, we don't. Let me tell you why. We don't live in a Black community. We live in a community that's owned by white people and that's populated by Black people. Why? Because they control the banks, they control the businesses, they control the institutions, they control everything. They control the police department. Why do you think there's so many police officers that are white that are not Black, or that are Asian and not Black people? Why? Because they own the police department. They control the police department. Why do you think they don't teach us about Black History Month and don't teach us certain topics? Why? Because they own the education system. We need to have more Black banks, Black businesses, Black police departments. Everything that I just talked about, we need to own and control. It's all about power and control, ladies and gentlemen. Power and control. And so in order to have us build our own community, we need to have those organizations. Now, why is it important to have our own community? Is because the reason why it's important is because we need to have our own identity, our own sense of self, our own self-confidence, and we need to ultimately evolve as a people. But we cannot do that unless we have our own community. We need to have unity community. We need to eliminate poverty mentality. We need to have all of that. But unless we have our own community, we will never get out of the conditions we're in. Meaning we need to have control over everything. So Black people, in order to be successful, we need to have our own community. We need to have our own Black banks, control the Black banks, control the police department, control the education system, control the Black businesses, control everything. We need the power. Hell, I don't even think the Black churches are Black owned. Some of them. Some of them go to white banks. That's a problem. We need to have our own community, have our own Black banks, Black schools, Black everything. So let me show you, or excuse me, let me tell you of how many Black banks there are in the US. Let me give you a specific number. So in the United States of America, there is several Black banks. There are specifically 38 owned Black banks and credit unions. Let me say it again. There are 38 Black owned banks and credit unions. Now, that doesn't even include the amounts that are still in operation or still operational in 2020. That doesn't even include that. That only includes about only a few banks really are operational. That's sad. Now, let me give you a number of how many banks there are in the US total. This is according to a recent article I read, or Wikipedia. It says, as of December 31st, 2019, there are about 5,177 commercial banks and saving institutions in the US. Let me say that again. There is 5,177 commercial banks and saving institutions in the US. Do you know how sad that is, Black people? That we only have 38 Black owned banks within the United States of America, and there's 5,000 commercial banks and saving institutions in America currently? That is an astonishing number. You know why that's so astonishing? It's because we don't even have the majority shares or the majority Black owned banks. This is a problem within our community. But we have a bunch of liquor stores, though. We have a bunch of nonsense stores and everything else. and a bunch of fast food restaurants that aren't even owned by us. That's the sad part. They're not even owned by us. They're owned by the Koreans or the Hispanics or the Arabs, these type of businesses that are in our own community. But we need to build our own community in order for us to be successful. Let me say it again. We need to build our own community in order to have us be successful. Now, why is that important? Number one, it's important because we need to have control over our institutions, control over the banks, control over the police department, control over everything. Now, let me give you an estimated number of the police, how many black officers there are in the U.S. Because I want to give you a percentage of how many police officers there are in the U.S. because I want you to get an idea that we need to own our own communities, build our own communities. So let me give you specific numbers. So there are some black officers in the U.S., but ultimately this does not tell you the exact number. But there's a lot of U.S. police killings of black Americans. Do you know why that is? Well, the reason why that is, black people, is because of the racist police department, yes, but also who controls the police? White people. Who owns the police? White people. Who has influence in the police department? White people. Yes, you have some black officers, but do those black officers own the police department? Yes, you have black police chiefs, but do those black police officers own the police department? No. The white people, or white power structure, I should say, controls the police department. What does that tell you? That tells you that we do not own the police department. And because we don't own the police department, they're having people that are coming from outside our community and policing us. And this is causing us more harm, more detriment, and more damage to us as a community. So we need to have black police officers, and we have a black-owned police department. Why? So we can police our own community. I'm not saying defund the police and have dysfunction in law and order. I'm just saying we need to police our own community, so that way we can be successful. Great Marcus Garvey said that we need to have our own nation. We need to have our own nation and stop relying on other people. And we need to be self-confident. Well, how can we be self-confident if we don't have our own community, black people? So black people, ultimately, we need to have our own community, be faced with situations where we need to deal with ourselves as a people, and we need to have our own community so we can educate ourselves, control the education, control our history, control the narrative. Because a lot of times when it comes to the education portion of our community, we don't own that portion either. Why don't we own that? It is because the white power structure controls the education. They only teach about black history when it suits them. And they only teach about several figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Robinson, George Washington Carver, and that's a problem because they don't teach about what we need to know about our community, which is our history, the ancient African empires of the world. One of the African empires was the Moors, and they ruled for centuries. You know, you had other African empires in Ghana and Libya and what have you that ruled the world for centuries. Yet they don't teach you that in our own communities. Why is that? It is because they don't want us to be successful in our communities. They don't want us to learn from our communities. So in order for us to be successful, we need to have several things that we need to control. The police department, the education system, the banks, our businesses. These are the things that we need to control in our own community. Why? Because I'm going to say it again. I'm going to keep on saying it until y'all get through your thick skulls. Without us owning our community, we will continue to be in this condition as a people. Without us owning our own community, we will continue to be in this condition as black people. We will continue to be servants. We will continue to look for outside sources to build our own community. Now, recently on CNN, they're having a police reform bill, and that's great. But is that really going to solve the problem? Again, black people, we are looking towards outside sources to help us with our own community, and this is a problem. We need to control the police, and deal with the police in our own way. Have our own police department. Control the police. It's black owned, black police chief, black officers everywhere. Do not have outside people come in there and control our community because it's been a detriment to our people. Why is that? It is because they do not understand us as a community. They don't understand what we go through. They don't understand the struggle. They don't understand what it means to be black in America, but a black officer does. Therefore, he can be able to help us as a community. He will be able to listen to us. He will be able to help us out with our situations. He will be able to police us if we get out of line. Because we have some people that want to commit crime and what have you in our own community. So we need to have our own people police our community. This is what the Black Evolution is all about. It's having us evolve as a people. It's getting rid of this mindset, getting rid of the old things and the old situations. We need to stop begging the white power structure for freedom, and we need to have our own freedom. How do we do this? We have our own communities. We have our own businesses. We have our own black banks. Now we have black banks, but that's not enough. We need to have more black banks all across the board, all across our own communities. Every community needs to have these several institutions: hospitals, education system, banks, police departments, and businesses. Why? Because if we do not own this community, I cannot say this enough. If we do not have our own community, we will be in this condition of begging the white power structure for freedom. And it's time for us as black people to stand up, get up, clean up, and stand up to this injustice. So as black people, we need to have and build our own communities. We need to also have the funding for our own communities. This is where the black banks come in. The black banks finance the black businesses fund the black institutions, and so on and so forth. That way we will be able to control our own and have our own nation and have our own community. Once we have our own community, we can then go and build into our nation. Another problem with us as a community we need to have is black economics. Black economics comes a big portion because we need to have our own spending power, be in our own community. Once it's in our own community, we can deal with us as a community and deal with us as a people and finance our own businesses and finance our own institutions. And education system, we need to teach our own history and teach about the ancient African empires of the world. And most of the ancient people were black people. Do you know that if you read the scriptures, that Nimrod was a black man? Samson was a black man. He had dreadlocks. But they don't teach you that in the current public school system. Why? Because they want you to keep you in this weak, docile state. It is through the propaganda system. The propaganda system allows us to be in this weak, docile state and allows us to be, have this slave mentality or this poverty mentality, this slave mindset. And so as black people, we need to educate our own communities. We need to educate our system about our own history. We need to educate ourselves about our own power and how we came to be, and who the original black man was, and how do we form as a nation, and what did we do during these different time frames. We need to teach about the Haitian Revolution and how we beat Napoleon's behind. We teach about all these other black revolutions that took place. Because one of the things that have a problem with their own community in terms of education system is they don't teach about Dr. Martin Luther King. They don't teach you about Malcolm X. They don't teach you about the Black Panther Party. They don't teach you about these Nat Turner Rebellion. They don't teach you about any of these revolutions that took place in this country. Why? Because they want you to keep you in this weak, docile mentality. And so as a people, we need to control our own communities and build our own communities and control our education system and control our own police department. One of the things we also need to control as our community is the hospitals. Why? Because we need to have the best Medicare that we can know. We need to have black doctors who will help us out and not overcharge us with the insurance companies. We need to have a black-owned insurance companies. Why? Because they will help us in our community. We need to control every single aspect in our community. Why is that? Well, because with the hospitals, we can be able to control the healthcare, control the systems in our community, control how we are diagnosed, that we're not overly diagnosed with ADHD and all these other malfunctions that we are so-called diagnosed, because one of the things that plagues us as a community is our overdiagnosis of diseases and our pre-existing conditions. If we have black doctors, they'll be better equipped and better prepared to take care of us as a community. That's the thing we need to do. We never need to have outside sources be in our community. We need to never have outside sources. Why? Because when we have outside sources, they don't know what they're doing when it comes to our community. Especially when it, look at the banks that are in our community. Most of them are white controlled banks that take advantage of you and take your money. We need to have black businesses, not Korean businesses in our community. Why? Because they take advantage of you. We have restaurants that are not black owned. We have, institutions that are not black owned. So if they are in our community, they need to be able to donate in our community. Donate to our cause, donate to our struggle, donate to us as a community, give us the money we need so that way we can build our own community. Now, I'm going to close this podcast episode on this. One, in order to have and build our own community, we need black reparations. Let me say it again. In order to build our own community, we need black reparations. Why is that important? The reparations will be for the American descendants of slaves, and they'll be able to fund our own communities and give us the money that we need in order to jumpstart our own communities. We will have control of the black banks, the police department, the education system, and everything. So that way, we will be able to grow strong as people. We will be able to evolve as people. We will be able to unite as a people. These are very important things that we need to do. So the next topic I'm going to talk about in the Dab Nail podcast is the Black Reparations Plan that I came up with, and how we need to have our own, reparations, and have our own land and have our own nation. This is part of that. So I want to give you guys the idea of having our own community, black people. When are we going to have our own community? When are we going to control our own community? When are we going to control our own destiny? Now, a lot of people have stated, even the great Marcus Garvey has stated, that we need to go back to Africa, that we need to build our own nation. I agree. But in order to do that, we need to build our own community first in the U.S. Have a test run. See if we can have our own community in the U.S. Then we can build to larger aspects of having our own nation. Once we have our own nation, we will be unstoppable. We will be able to control ourselves politically, socially, economically, and religiously. Politically, socially, economically, educationally, and religiously. These are things that we need to do and to have in our own community. So this concludes the Dab Nail podcast when it comes to the building our own community. I will see you next time in the Dab Nail podcast part 7, where we talk about, the Black Reparations Plan, how we need to have reparations in order to build our own communities. So this concludes Dab Nail podcast. Now I want you guys to listen to the outro music. Here we go.